Welcome back to this week's edition of the Street Vlog. I'm Aaron Ross, and this week I spent all week with the new Fujifilm 16 2.8 weather-resistant lens attached to my new Fuji camera.
Live from Chicago.
So I recently switched from Nikon to Fuji. There's a full video here on why I made that switch, and I'm spending a week with each lens attached to the Fuji X-T3. This week, that was the 16 2.8. I decided to start with this lens because it's different than anything I had on the Nikon system. It's wider, so it's giving me a different perspective, and I'm just going to possibly change my street photography more than some of the other lenses that I also got at this time. So I have 3 takeaways from my first week with the 16 2.8 lens. But before that, let's hop onto that voiceover and show what I was able to get out on the street. First up, we are on State Street at the Chicago Theater, trying to get the full theater sign with a little bit of what's in front of it, as well as the building behind it. This is what I was able to capture. I don't love what's going on in front, so we will be back. Then see this guy in a classic subway elevator, and he glances back at me, which really kind of made this photo what it is. Then notice this guy looking up. I have no idea what he was looking at, but I had the camera down at my hip and took a few photos, and this is what I was able to capture. There's a little bit of intrigue that I really like. I then stumbled across this group of skaters who were doing a lot of really interesting tricks. It gave me an opportunity to use some of the high-speed frame rates of the Fuji X-T3. And this guy here that just tried to do the railing is who I ended up focusing on, and got 2 photos of him coming down that handrail. I then made my way to another staircase where there was a few others of the group trying to do a few tricks. I was really on my way out, and as I make my way up these steps, you'll see this kid in pink go kind of behind me. Goes a little higher than the railing, which was not something I'd seen anybody else do, so I was hoping he would try and do it again. I came back down, and he did end up trying this over and over again, but as you'll see here, this is more of what ended up happening. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a great photo of him, as I did need to move on. As I headed up into the L, this is a really cool situation that ended up happening. What you'll see here is a guy in just a moment come around, and he will make eye contact right there with somebody, and right in front of me, they ended up kissing. And I had no idea this was gonna happen. I obviously had to respond very quickly. Again, I had the camera down at my hip and was able to get this photo right here. So those are a few of the highlights of a session that I had with the 16mm camera and being out in the streets of Chicago. So welcome back to the office, and now we're going to dive into the 3 takeaways. The first is going to be the amount that you can include in the frame. In the past, when I've tried to take photos of buildings or signs and also include maybe another subject, a person walking by, a cyclist, something like that, it's always a struggle to get everything in the frame. By using this 16mm, it's so wide that I can actually do that. So it opens up the possibilities of being able to include more context in that frame with a subject or something else going through the image. The second takeaway is that I have to get in the action. By using a 16mm lens and it being so wide, if you want to get a certain person in the frame to be taking up part of that composition, you have to get really close, and that can be uncomfortable. Previously, when I've done street photography, I've been able to stand a little bit further back, and therefore the person may not notice me as much. But by having this 16mm lens, I'm having to be just a couple feet away from them to be able to get some of these photos. So for some people that may be a con. For me, it's pushing me out of my comfort zone. It's making me think about photography a little bit differently, particularly out on the street. And it's, I think already, even in this first week, generated some photos that I'm proud of and I think are unique that I wouldn't have been able to get before. And the third takeaway is you really don't have to worry about focus quite as much. Because it's such a wide lens, even at 2.8, the widest aperture that this thing goes, it's not going to be super shallow depth of field. You're not going to get a ton of bokeh. Right now, I'm shooting on this lens at 2.8, and you can see that I'm in focus and the background really isn't all that out of focus. So by shooting out on the street and just bumping up the aperture a few stops, you're really able to have a wide depth of field and not have to worry so much about nailing that focus every single time. Future editing Aaron here. Not really sure what happened to some of the wrap-up video clips, but here we go. Future Aaron, giving it a round 2. So I had a great time during my first week using this lens. I'm really excited for what it's going to do to open up some of the creativity in my photography, open up new types of photography, and really change a little bit of the direction that even my street photography is going. So next week, we'll be taking off the 16mm and putting on the 35mm. So make sure and subscribe. And until next time, just get started.